And so with that, I'm going to introduce Nwando Clyburn, who is our newest staff member at E3, I think, newest staff member at E3. Definitely on our Blueprint team. She has decades of experience in education, coming from a lot of work in early education, early literacy, having been a teacher at Title I schools across Central Texas, and being part of systems, most recently TDA and Reading Academies. So she comes with a wealth of experience and wealth of heart in working to change education for our students. So Nwando, definitely come up.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this E3 Summit. It is absolutely amazing. And I'm going to go ahead and invite our panelists to come up. And I would love to go ahead and start with some introductions as they get ready to come onto the stage. Let's get comfy. That's a great Okay, this panel allows us to explore some conversations about our youngest learners. You've heard today about thriving. You've heard today about how we can tell the stories for our youngest learners. And today we have an amazing panel right here. And I'm going to start with you, Cathy. This is Cathy McHorse. She has more than 20 years of experience in early childhood education and community advocacy. Cathy McHorse is currently serving as the manager for the Affordable Childcare Now Coalition through United Way for Greater Austin. She is the chair of the City of Austin Early Childhood Council and is a member of the Board of Directors for Workforce Capital Area. What are you seeing as one of the most pressing issues in early education?
Well, as Laura said, the first 5 years are the most rapid and critical period of brain development. And it's really essential that we have an ecosystem that focuses on the earliest years and using that opportunity to set children up for success. Unfortunately, in the state of Texas and across our country, public investment in learning from birth is the lowest investment across the birth to 12 on to college curriculum. Actually, the investment is inversely proportional to a student's age. So we have essentially no public investment in birth through age 3 education. And this is critical because we know that sets the trajectory for where children go. Also important to know that those first 3 years, earliest years, are the most segregated early learning environments of all. And so to really transform our system and make sure when children enter pre-K or kindergarten, whatever age that is, or 3, 4, or 5, that we're really thinking about supporting those children and families, whatever environment they're in, and making sure that they're ready to be successful there. And that really focuses on optimal development, parent and caregiver interactions, building self-regulation skills, building their communication skills. That's all the foundation for literacy and math and success in school.
Wonderful. That investment piece is absolutely critical, and I really appreciate you sharing that. So we have next Dr. Natalie Nichols is a military veteran. Dr. Nichols has served in education for over 24 years as an English teacher, athletic coach, instructional coach, assistant principal, high school principal, and area superintendent. With her current role, she leads and supports the district's 56 campuses and the department that falls under student support services and curriculum and instruction. You know I have to throw that same question to you. What are you seeing?
So I'll give it from the macro level. You did such an amazing job as far as breaking it down. I am just going to add to it a bit. From a macro level, the idea as far as how public schools are funded as it relates to early education is really a hardship for many campuses. Right now, we're saying that 80% of all Texas districts are passing a deficit budget. And so when you think about that, you're passing a deficit budget, but yet when it comes to pre-K3 and pre-K4, it is only funded for half days. And so for a district then to have to turn around and say, where am I going to find that money in order to take care of these students? That's a real hardship. So for me, that idea, there are many different things we can do differently, but at a macro level, it starts there. I can't begin to take care of curriculum, teacher education, parent outreach and engagement. All of that gets stalled if I can't even fund these programs in the first place. So I would say that's what I see as our biggest issue as far as really being able to take care of these families and these vulnerable workers.
That's beautiful. That funding piece seems to be critical at every stage of this development. All right, and we have Dr. Claire Hagen Alvarado. She is the current director of Literacy First, an organization based in the University of Texas that teaches young children how to read in Spanish and English through high-impact tutoring. As a former teacher, reading specialist, and district leader, she has spent the last 2 decades working in the field of reading education, earning an educational leadership doctorate from the Harvard School of Graduates, and a master's degree in language and literacy from UT Austin. What are you seeing in your work?
Well, hey everybody, it's so good to see familiar faces out there today and important people in the room. I'm going to say something not surprising because I am the director of Literacy First, and you've heard the description of what we do. We teach young children how to read in English and Spanish, and I think the most pressing issue in education is teaching young children how to read in English and Spanish, and especially I want to call attention to kindergarten through 2nd grade. I know we've had a lot to talk about and a lot of work to do leading up to kindergarten, which you've heard some important points around. And then we jump and we look at 3rd grade and how children do. And I think there's some missing conversation and missing metrics, missing attention and nourishment and resource devoted to our 5 to 8-year-olds. And so, not to say that before that age is not important and after that age is not important, but we focus so heavily on that 3rd grade reading assessment that what I see and what I continue to see, even though I know there's a lot of good, important district work focusing on our early grades, but I still see this flurry around state testing in 3rd grade and resources devoted there, interventionists devoted there, when it is pretty late in a child's development to be getting intensive intervention and extra support when they're already that far along in their learning of literacy skills. So there's a lot we can do in 3rd grades.
Yes, you really speak to strengthening the foundations. In kinder, we just saw some data about kinder readiness. We have to be able to monitor at 1st and 2nd grade if we have any hopes of the students being very successful at 3rd. That's beautiful. All right, and our next panelist here is Monica Saldivar. She is in her 20th year in education. Her previous experience includes serving as an elementary bilingual teacher and instructional coach, assistant principal, and most recently the proud principal at Carver Early Education Center. She is honored to serve as the director of bilingual education for Lockhart ISD. Monica knows that a child's initial school experience sets the tone for their entire academic career and can determine the path they travel in life. And she is proud to be on that journey with those students.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm going to echo what my colleagues and friends said about the most pressing issue in education being inadequate funding. We know that teachers and students need access and deserve access to all of the resources necessary for them to thrive in their educational settings. Aside from funding, I think state accountability requirements are just inequitable. I think that, I think of our rising newcomer student population who join us with very diverse learning experiences and how they are pressured to perform at levels that are aligned with their peers. And I think of the pressure that's put on teachers to get them to those levels of language acquisition in accelerated rates, and it's just not. So that's my perspective.
Wonderful. You really know about those newcomers. And with that, we're going to go ahead and just dive into system change. Let's start that conversation with looking at systems that need to change across the board. To build a transformational system, what should be done in collaboration with the community, schools, districts, or even at the state level to advance students in math and reading? What do you see as the most pressing issues or barriers for our youth? Cathy, what are you thinking?
Well, I think that often we aren't thinking on that birth to 12th grade continuum because birth through 3 isn't really part of the public education system. But if we're really believing that children are born learning, you have to think about where are those circumstances they are, like Laura mentioned, are they at home, are they with grandparents, are they in formal childcare, and make sure that those places and families and organizations are resourced to support early learning. And those early learning educators are trained and compensated for the work that they do in preparing children to come to school. And often when we talk about the school system and public education, we just start at pre-K. And if we don't think about those earlier years and resource it sufficiently, then we're going to be starting from.
Yes, you really speak to, we are born learning, and then we just jump right over all of those very critical years. Claire, what is that saying to you? What are you thinking about those system changes?
I think Richard answered this question this morning, because to me it goes back to centering families, children, educators at the heart of whatever change we're trying to make. And unfortunately, I think in my experience, I've seen some great shifts and important legislation with reading, for example, reading education, and yet, if I think back to 2019, when Reading Academies, the most recent iteration of Reading Academies, came about, I was at TEA at that time, and got kind of swept into trying to take that policy and then quickly build the system for thousands. I think it's over 10,000 educators, K-3 teachers and administrators who needed to take the Reading Academies in like a month. It was a year. And we did get a slight extension in the timing to be able to do that. And yet, as many of you probably experienced, the rollout was extremely problematic with the timing of the pandemic. The first version was tough, and I know we had electricity during the pandemic, but I swear my memory is that we made these Reading Academies by candlelight because it felt like it was round the clock, and just in a different era. And while we worked really hard to figure out ways to build transfer, ways for the theory to translate into practice, the first round was kind of a rush job. And so then after several iterations, and I think 5 years now of versions of these academies, and really great work on behalf of districts and authorized providers to do that better and to build it into new teachers' practice coming on into a new position, or someone who hadn't taken academies previously. It's so much better, and yet many thousands of people went through those academies in that rushed way that wasn't as effective as it could be. So unfortunately, I see that we have a great opportunity with some big legislation, and yet because we're not necessarily always listening to the people who are doing the work, or the people who are going to be the ones going through whatever policy change is happening, we're missing steps along the way. So I think the alignment of those systems, and not just passing the legislation, but then all the rulemaking and all the implementation pieces in practice really need to be paid attention to very closely.
Wonderful. You kind of lean into the Reading Academies was the start and very, very far from the finish. It gave us a starting place to say, you know what, we have a place where professional development can start to grow. But as we all here are adults and adult learners, it goes beyond that point. You can go through a course, but what else has to be done to make sure that it actually goes into the classroom, it's implemented, and it touches every single child that we've been talking about all day. All right? And with that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about another group, which is the families. Those are that other piece that Richard did talk about. We have educators, we have families, and we have students that we're going to lean into. So for students to thrive, there are several factors that support progression, which include community support, teachers, students, and families. What types of resources are needed to support these young children? Cathy, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking about our families and our community, especially, with our youngest children, which will be my refrain. We don't come with instruction booklets. Every family needs support when they have a young child, and having information and resources helping them understand child development and the importance of the serve and return interaction. And that vocabulary and oral communication is what leads to later literacy, building that vocabulary. So I think really making sure parents have support, and also knowing that if parents have their basic needs met, that's a big challenge. If they are struggling with housing, or they're struggling with work, and they're experiencing poverty, that is toxic stress, and that will interfere with their ability to provide a nurturing, supportive environment for their children. And we need to acknowledge that and the impact it has on children's educational experiences.
Now, you really are thinking about the family as a whole and all of the needs that they will have to have met so they can support those children. Claire, how does this line up for you?
Yeah, I definitely agree that oral language is so valuable and foundational as children grow and throughout their literacy journeys. But also I would want families to know that they should speak in whatever language is most comfortable for them, most fluid for them, and knowing that that might not be the dominant language of school or their communities or their society, our society, but yet it's critical for the child's development for them to be able to then add on additional languages or even to learn simultaneously, as we know many of our young emerging bilinguals do already. And so understanding the amount of vocabulary that you can build, the background knowledge that you can establish by speaking in your dominant language or in a mixture of languages is okay too. And then I think back to what Laura said, I liked those questions, to know how your children are achieving and how they're growing. So knowing where children are at in their development, and not just hearing like, oh, your child is in the yellow, if they're red. But what specifically, like, how are they thriving? Where are they thriving, and where are there areas that we need extra support with, and how can we zoom in and provide that support? And then I think lastly that there's a lot we can do with knowledge building and partnering, working with families on that part of background knowledge. I know we have my younger son in first grade, and we're getting a lot of good information about like the units that they're working on in class. However, I will say it goes from, let's see, we had fables, and then it was like a week, and then now we're in the human body, and then I think we're going on to like ancient civilizations and maybe landforms. And so there's this like quick turnover of topics, and it's really hard to kind of support that and go deeper with that information at home. And I think that I've seen some really good results with schools when we have the resources available, providing complementary books, titles, resources to go deeper on a topic, even if you don't know about that topic yourself, you're exploring with your child. And hopefully giving it a little more time for those units to really go deep into the content as well as the vocabulary, and being able to develop that with your children, I think could make a huge difference in how we learn and how families are resourced with information for kids.
Thank you. Natalie or Monica, do you see this showing up in your work when you're thinking about that family piece?
Absolutely. What I will say from the school's perspective, we talked a lot about systems. All of the analysts have talked about systems, but I wanted to be like very specific and explicit with some of you in the audience. We went through science of reading training. And in some districts, you got to say, hey, I'm going to do this for K-3, or I want all my elementary teachers. In other districts, you have to make a decision. Who else needs to be trained and needs to know that work. So what happens with the system change, oftentimes we forget the whole system, and how do we train into different people based on their roles? If this is being rolled out, everyone needs to be in the system, needs to be trained. But there's a different training for teachers. There's something that librarians need to know. There's something that our administrators need to know. And oftentimes, I think what happens with these roles is we say system change, but there's not a plan for the entire system. So then what happens is, as administrators within systems, what we have to do, and so I'm a geek about certain things. One of the things that I love to use is a logic model, where you go through and say, here are all the different roles. If I'm going to move this specific number and achieve at a different rate, who are all the people that I need to train into? My parents, my teachers, my administrators, even my district level staff. So if we're going to do science of reading and the teacher's been trained, who trained them to write different curriculum that aligns with the science of reading? Who taught them how to look at curriculum to figure out whether it's aligned? Because if you're in the district, you know the okie doke they try to pull on us is, hey, this was good for balanced literacy, but it's also good for science of reading. How can the same curriculum do two different things? Right, but if we have not trained them, how do they know to be a discriminating customer to see if it meets the need of that new way we need to teach our students? So oftentimes what I'm seeing within systems is this: it was never a system change, but we expected a system result. So really go through and figure out, what's that? And look through and really decide what are all the different roles that you trained into, and did you train them based on what they need to perform? Or did you just give them information? You never told me what I had to change or how I had to change and what I needed to do. We trained into, I gave you information, but just because I have information doesn't mean I know what to do differently. So part of it, if you are in a leadership position, it was never the teacher's fault, it was never the principal's fault. We, at the higher levels, need to accept that responsibility because we did not train them accurately based on what I needed them to do differently. So really understanding what system change really means. We keep saying that, but I think it's really important that you go back and we have to accept the responsibility based on where we sit within the system as far as what we do differently. So that's what I would say as far as one of the big things. And the parents are someone that we need to train to. So very quickly, did you change your report card? If you're changing how you look at what they need to know and how they need to know it and how the students need to perform, did you change how I gave the report card to the parent so they can understand where they are in regards to those skills? Whatever screener that I'm teaching, that I'm using, did I teach the teachers how to read that screener and give the information to that parent? Right, so there are all so many details to this that I think that we missed. We just figured that we got trained on the new curriculum, not even the new curriculum, on this new process, this new way of looking at things, and it would translate to all these other processes, and it didn't. So really and truly, if we're in a leadership position within our various organizations, we need to rethink the way we prepared our systems for this change. Beautiful. That's a lot to come after, but yes, we have given information, but the system hasn't changed. If we still had bumper stickers, I would have put that on the back of my car. All right, Monica, what are your thoughts?
I think I'll just, wrap that up by just sharing that I think before we can talk to parents about, what their students are learning and how they're learning to read, et cetera, I think the most important component to being able to do so is by creating a truly, genuinely welcoming environment, one where they feel like they have a voice, one where they can advocate for their children, one where they feel like they are valued also. And I think that once that partnership has been established, you can move mountains in how you help them support their children at home. Just like with children, once you capture the family's hearts, you can give them the tools that they need to be successful. And I just think that the ultimate goal is for there to be no boundary between home and school.
Giving that family a sense of belonging. All right, I think we're already leaning into this kind of question. Changes are also occurring, as you know, at the state level. Across the state of Texas and in many states across the nation, legislative mandates have been put in place to support the science of teaching reading through training programs like the Reading Academies. We've spoken a little bit about it, but are there any additional supports at the student level that need to be done?
All right, so at the student level, what changes do we need?
So one of the things that I'm going to say, I love the idea of we have not looked at the whole system. We're expecting changes to happen in our tested areas, but not understanding how then the process is with our students underneath that. I will go into a very micro explanation as far as some of the things that need to happen differently with our students. And it comes from a place of curriculum. So many of you, if you're in districts, you know that for our students, there's something where we have accelerated instruction. Students where if you're tested, you perform at the two lowest levels, did not meet low, did not meet high. You're in that learning gap. And for many of you, at your lower levels, you have literacy screeners, also mathematics screeners for even some of your youngest learners to know how they're doing. One of the things that I will say is this. In order to get a real big system change, we have often relied on interventionists to say, here's how many interventionists I have at this school, and they will intervene with these kids that are not performing at high levels in order to change that data around. But if you are at a title campus or a campus where you have a great percentage of learners who are performing at lower levels, your pyramid is inverted. You don't have just the top 10 or 20% of kids to intervene with. You may have upwards of 50, 60%. So one of the things I will tell you where we need to do something differently with students and how we need to think differently is that idea of not intervention as it relates to one-on-one teaching, but intervention as it relates to grouping and regrouping. So to see a grade level as where teachers themselves become interventionists. When we have then outlaid the work and say an interventionist intervenes, and not that that is a core responsibility of teacher, what you have done then is you have set your school up for failure. All right? You need to understand that within your allocations, you don't necessarily need more teachers. You just need to think of a different structure. So that idea of if we are a team and we are on the same grade level, we can literally tear our kids and we could say, when intervention time comes for reading, Natalie, you take the kids that are performing at this level. You take the kids that are performing at this level. We can become our own intervention team and then pour into the kids in order to move them as a, what is it, Matt? I'm trying to remember this lady I used to training when I was a rookie teacher, but move them up and to the right as far as in their learning. So for me, when it comes to really supporting students, sometimes our adult actions and the systems that we have in place and what we think we could do, oh, I need more teachers. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you really don't. Sometimes you may just need a new way of thinking and a new teacher, so a new system. Thank you, friend. So oftentimes what I would say, that idea, that's a very micro thing that I have seen within our system. Think about the idea when it comes to intervention as far as what does it look like when you create this idea, not of one-on-one, but I am regrouping for my intervention in order that you're putting like learners together and giving them the curriculum that they can access to get them to move to a higher level. So that's one of the things I'm seeing on micro level. Thank you for your question.
Monica, how about you?
No, I absolutely agree. You said that beautifully. I think that one of the things that we have to hold on to when you're feeling kind of defeated in our classrooms or teachers, when we're feeling just kind of inundated with like the things that they need to do to catch students up, I feel like we need to make sure that we're celebrating growth with our students, that we are cheering them on along the way, so that we don't lose sight of this feeling of, constantly coming across roadblocks and challenges and just focusing on controlling what they can control in their classrooms and celebrating growth with students.
Claire, Cathy, did that speak to you in any way that made you think about the work that you're doing in the community or with schools and how that can support students?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. There's a lot we can do in core instruction and rethinking targeted skills-based instruction. And I also see the need for like a locking of arms moment. And sometimes I do think, because we do focus on intervention and literacy first, that we can bring in support and really skilled support, and also look at that, the needs of our students cohesively across a classroom or grade level to see who's serving who and when and how. Because I agree, there's a ton you can do with kind of rethinking and regrouping for intervention. And then I do think there's some more intensive supports needed at times. And we see right now, about 66% of students in the schools that we're in, which are 90% students qualifying for free and reduced lunch, 66% are qualifying for intervention. And that used to be more like 50% before the pandemic, so still problematic at that time. Now it's not really improved. It was 70% right after peak of the pandemic, now, in the 60s. And so I wonder, how to join in together and provide more calculated support, and especially also for multilingual learners. So I think that we have more information and research and practices to support our multilingual learners or more attention, more skill in that area than maybe we've had in the past, and more ways to intervene specifically in Spanish and English that hasn't been overlooked, because we've had bilingual education in Texas since the 70s. But it's something we could really highlight and focus on and bring forward to support the 88% of students who are from Spanish-speaking backgrounds who are emerging bilinguals.
I'm just thinking more about across systems, collaborating more between the early childhood system into pre-K and kindergarten, and how we support children and family in those transitions, as well as thinking about how we really think about intervention with our youngest learners and what's developmentally appropriate, and not drill and skill very constrained skills, but really what is evaluating what is missing or what needs to be supported in that student's development that is a support system for things like literacy. So is it their self-regulation? Do they need to play a little more? If they don't have context for phonemic sounds, they need to sing, they need to play and dance and rhyme. And so meeting our youngest children with their where they are developmentally and supporting that to build the skills that they need to have to be successful later.
You definitely elevated oral language to the top of the next parts of change that we need to integrate. So thinking about our early learners, and now we're going to take that shift right to the campus, right to the district. What are the needs of campus and district leaders when it comes to early learning? Do they have barriers that are preventing them from helping those young kids succeed? And Monica, go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, so historically, I think whenever we take a look at data, we tend to focus on that which standardized testing data provides us, right? And we glance at data, longitudinal data from pre-K through second grade and the results they yield now. And I think that something I'm really proud of is the work that we're doing in Lockhart, where we have prioritized shared leadership. And so that allows for campus administrators to utilize their campus leadership teams to make sure that we're being laser focused on progress monitoring across all grade levels, including pre-K. This also allows for administrators who might be a little disconnected because they never taught in the early learning grade levels, right? They can lean on their experts. They can just rely on them to help guide decision making and to drive planning and such. Just so that we are intentional about the support that we're providing in the early learning years, because we know it's foundational in their entire academic career. And so I'm really proud of the work that we're doing in Lockhart when it comes to shared leadership and making sure that we bring lots of lenses to our leadership teams.
Natalie, how about you as you work with district and campus leaders across your district? How are you seeing the needs of early learning?
So there's a couple of things. First, I will start with the emotional barrier. One of the things that I love to say is everything's a lesson plan. And every lesson plan, you plan for emotional content and also for whatever the written content is. We underestimated the emotion that went into this change in science and reading, and how attached our teachers and administrators and even people at the district level were to that idea of changing to science of reading. They saw it, literally, some of them just felt that, what, this is the devil, not today, Satan. They felt that it was, you were taking away the beauty of learning to read, the fun of it, the beauty of it, and that we're being kind of like militant in what we were doing with it. So one of the things we really seriously have to think about is how we help our system more. I literally had people who would cry in meetings. You don't care about kids if you want them to learn in this way. So please do not underestimate if you are a secondary person, because I'm a secondary person and I'm like, I don't understand what's happening right now. I really had to understand that world and what was the emotion behind it and figure out as a leader, I had to validate those emotions and figure out how I worked through that process and to understand what we were doing and why. But I could not minimize those feelings. Those were very real. So if you're someone who is at the secondary level, please make sure that you're working through that with your teachers and staff at all levels. So that was one thing. The other thing I had to realize is just like the teachers had to be trained as far as what this meant, I seriously had to develop a training plan for everyone. What the curriculum specialists, the people who are writing the curriculum, how would they know differently what to do? And so there was intense training that went into that as far as for them. The campus administrators, yes, they had to know what the teachers knew, but how do I know to walk the classroom differently? What am I looking for specifically, not just instructionally, but based on content and skill? Because then early literacy, early math will look a little bit differently at each of the different levels. One of the things that we saw where we fell apart, we did a beautiful job training into the lower grades, and we got great scores. We were able to see in kindergarten and first grade, if you lined all of our campuses up, you could not tell what was a Title I campus and what was a traditionally high-achieving campus, because then it came down to skill of the campus level. You could not tell. And so you literally had, so when we saw that pattern, we knew, okay, the curriculum we rewrote and what we trained it into was working. But what we saw in second grade was no growth at all. Now, when I came to my team and I said, well, let's look at this. We own this pattern. They're like, no, those kids, those teachers, those parents, they're messing up. They don't know what they're doing. We delivered amazing curriculum. And I'm like, no, we rewrote kindergarten and first grade and second grade. It worked here. There's something we did not understand, and we wrote our misunderstanding into the data. So all of that to say this, you have to look at the data and figure out who needs the intervention. It is not always your students, it is not always your teachers, it is not always the parents, it is not always your campus administrators. The intervention may need to be at the district level, depending on where you see the pattern. So we have to go back and take the data apart and say, let's break down how we measured this skill at second grade level. Where were they strong, were they weak? Let's go ahead and find in the curriculum what that looked like and figure out what did we write and what did we need to do differently because maybe we're not understanding. And I had to train into that for the people who were responsible for writing that curriculum. So long, short, figure out where the intervention is needed. Stop thinking it is a student intervention or a teacher intervention or even a principal intervention. If you're seeing it's a system-wide issue, then it is a district intervention, and you need to figure out what behavior you need to change and train into it.
With that, I have one last question for the entire panel. Thriving has been the theme of today. How will we know when our youth are thriving in early education? How will our work impact student outcomes once the foundational years are strengthened? So I'll start with you, Cathy, to give us a little idea about what that looks like.
So Laura showed us some great data about kindergarten readiness. I will say I don't love the Textia as a tool because it is just a literacy screener. And there's so much else that we need to know about our early learners, about when they come into kindergarten, than just their literacy. It can predict a lot, the trajectory, but I think that we'll need to continue following those scores, but we need to look more holistically at our youngest learners when they come in. And we also need to really think about where those children are coming from, what are their early experiences before they come into the system, that will impact whether they are thriving or not, because I know what that looks like when they get to kindergarten. It's setting a trajectory for the rest of their years up to third grade. So by investing earlier and investing more strongly in those first years, we'll see more success.
Thank you.
So your question is about what will we see as an end result in the system? So as an end result in the system, I totally agree with you. It's this idea of holistically, we see someone who's leaving us not just academically ready, but also emotionally and mentally ready to take on whatever there is. I always say that our job is to teach into them, to pour into them. They get to decide after that how they want to use it. If they decide, look, I'm gonna go surfing, I'm gonna Uber, do you. But I know I gave you what you needed and you can go anywhere you want. I want to, E3 does such amazing work, and I want to make sure we understand the through line within that work. That idea that the work that we do with early literacy leads them to how their understanding of math. The idea of their ability to get into advanced math really is the pathway for them to get to college, career, and military readiness. And then afterwards, to launch from our systems and be successful in whatever venue they go. I hate, just as a short digression, I hate using the word, the term college, career, and military readiness because it makes us think they're all four different things. They're all the same thing. We just want kids to be able to leave our system reading and writing at high levels. Because what I need for college, what I need for trade school, what I need for the military, it really is the same test if you've ever had that experience. There is no difference. It's the same skill. So the fact that we separate it creates this false hierarchy that does not exist. But what I want is for students to leave the system and to be just confident that wherever I choose to go, I have the skills needed to do that. I will add a personal anecdote to that. When I left high school, I did not graduate from high school. I was a high school dropout, and then I got my GED, and then I went into the military, left the military after 6 years, had finished up my degree while I was in the military, and then went on. I had always wanted to be a teacher. All that to say this, sometimes for our students, but many times, not graduating has nothing to do with whether or not they're smart. We have to understand in our system that your students, they're real life people. They will face difficulties. And so our whole thing is, have I given you enough to where you're able to meet that difficulty head on and push through it within their own timeline, right? That's what I want for our kids. You may not graduate all at the same time. You may not hit college at the same time. Who knows? You might decide to go back to school in your 40s. But I've given you enough that you know how to push through, and you have what you need emotionally, mentally, and academically in order to face that hurdle and circumvent it. And so that is what I feel that if we're successful, we will see from our students.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sharing your story. And kind of want to end it there, but I'm going to say, I think, ultimately I want to see those metrics looking more equitable. When we look at data at an E3 summit and across income levels and backgrounds, But knowing the families, the children behind that data and the stories that go along with that data, I want to see in the classroom, I want to see joyous, confident, skilled learners who are ready, even when they enter, and then all along to enter the learning pit, as Loretta Hammond says, and they are not afraid to make mistakes, to push through, and then also to pursue the futures of their choices and their dreams. And so along with that is the skill and the background knowledge and family support and all that alignment of systems that we've been talking about.
Thank you.
And just to sum that up, I'm really proud of being a member of E3's Emergent Bilingual Steering Committee. And I think one of my favorite adventures through that learning was when we collectively drafted a success definition. And I carry it with me because it states, we will know that our emergent bilingual students are successful when they and their families feel valued, when they're empowered to self-advocate. And I think that's true for all students, and I'll echo the importance of them being able to face adversity through life and just continuing to identify a passion, to pursue that passion, and just to build a brighter future for themselves with confidence. And I think our work begins, our work to cheerlead, to support begins the day that they enter our schools.
Thank you. If you all will, please give this amazing. Time for maybe one or two questions from the audience. So please feel free to ask any questions about learning foundations, and we will bring a microphone around to you.
I know it was pretty awesome, wasn't it? Any questions? Oh, here. So, Jane Taylor with First in Texas. Ladies, y'all did an amazing job. I know that this conversation has gone over a lot of things, but the thing that kind of touched me was the conversation about literacy. And I was just thinking about the time that, in a tech-based world, and we're pushing tech literacy, coding, and all of these kind of innovative things. And then I think about some of the challenges that you talked about with literacy, and I wonder, are there any suggestions when you think about what we're up against, where most parents or these young parents, they don't read books at least, they read all day, read social media, but they don't, so the kids don't really see that as much. Some of the things that we traditionally align with being literally, being reading ready, I guess you'd say. Any suggestions like considering that we're in this tech-driven sort of society now, where you can just kind of tell Google to read it for you, or the kids can just go and talk and ask the Siri or someone to do it and just read it to them or whatever. And so is there any suggestions of what changes or what some of the more innovative ways to maybe combat that in order to kind of address our dire situation?
Panelists, would someone like to take that question?
I'm old. My back will tell you I'm old, and my knees will tell you that I'm old. And oftentimes, that would be something that would bother me as well. And then I read something somewhere that totally changed my perspective in regards to students and technology. So the short answer is, don't try to combat it, use it. And so here's a perception change maybe. I read something and it says, well, okay, are you still wanting people to know how to shoe a horse? Based on the fact that at one time that was the only way we had to transport ourselves. Okay, at one point we used calligraphy was the way that people wrote. Are you still wanting people to know and understand calligraphy? So all that to say, things change. And so for me, it's an idea of not saying that the kids have to learn and do everything in the same way, but how do we amend based on their new context? You still have to read. but how do I use that reading in the context which is most relevant for you? It's the way that I really had to change my perception, because then I was forcing my context, my age, my role, and my experience onto the students where some of the things were no longer relevant. Right, and so the thing is then, how do I use the thing you really like to get you to learn the skill that I feel is really important for you? Is where I had to shift my thinking. Because for the longest while, I didn't realize I was old until this kept happening. It's like, why am I just bucking up against the system? Because everything is different, and you're right. The parents for these young learners oftentimes are in their 20s, and it's a totally different mindset. And so I'm like, okay, I need to change myself for my customer. Keep the skill the same, but the vehicle can be different.
And instead of going to one more question, I think we are at time. This panel is so incredible, and thank you guys so much for being up here, for sharing your stories, and for contextualizing the data of where our students are and where they're going, and understanding how we can help them thrive. We would like you to help us thrive in filling out your surveys. We do pay attention to this. This helps us get things better every year. We have another breakout session for you this afternoon, but definitely take the time, use the QR code, fill out your surveys on this morning's work. But also, once again, thank you for an incredible panel. What a powerhouse. Thank you.